To do this job, you must first remove the encoder. I'm Matt Carr, Field Service Manager here at Torn Drive. These are the tools you're going to need to change the rear bearing on the TGL 1 and 2 machines. 3 M12 all-threaded rods, 2 M12 nuts, 2 rods of M20, 18mm wrench, a 30mm wrench, a pull handle and an 18mm socket, a 30-ton jack, and the bearing replacement tools that you can get here at Torn Drive International. Using the pull handle and the 18mm socket, remove the bolts from the back cover of the machine. Remove the back cover and the bearing spring. Using the 30mm wrench, remove the top 2 bolts in the cover of the machine. Install the M20 threaded rods in these 2 holes. Install 2 M16 all-thread rods into the jack holes on the rear cover to remove the plate. Using a 24mm wrench, screw the jack bolts into the machine to remove the rear cover of the machine. Remove the rear cover of the machine. Use a strap to hoist the rear cover out of the way. Using the 4mm Allen wrench, remove the plastic shaft end cap for the encoder. Using a flathead screwdriver and a ball peen hammer, punch the lock ring tab back so that you can remove the lock nut and the lock ring from the shaft. Using the brass punch, remove the locking nut from the shaft. Remove the locking nut and the locking ring from the shaft. Install an M12 rod into the shaft and then 2 M12 rods into the cover. Install the jack and the bearing removal plate. For spacing, we also used the jack back plate and the bearing removal tool along with the back plate for the bearing removal on this job. Install M12 nuts on the outer 2 rods that go to the bearing plate. At this time, use the jack and remove the bearing. Reinstall the cover back onto the shaft. Line up the bearing on the shaft. You can tap it with a hammer. Get it set so that you can press it on. Thread an M12 rod into the shaft. Install the bearing replacement tools onto the M12 rod. Install the jack onto the M12 rod and then install the end plate onto the M12 rod and then put an M12 nut on the rod. At this time, use the jack to press the bearing back onto the shaft. Remove the M12 nut, the back plate, the jack, the bearing press tool, and the M12 rod from the shaft. Install the lock ring onto the shaft and then install the lock nut. Tighten the lock ring down on the shaft using a hammer and the brass punch. Lock the tab into the nut using a screwdriver and a hammer. Thread the 20mm rods back into the top 2 holes to hold the back cover for the machine. Install the back cover of the machine. Remove your hoisting strap. Install a piece of M12 all thread through the back cover and screw it into the bearing cover on the inside so that you can line up your holes. Reinstall the 2 M20 bolts in the bottom holes, and then you can use them to help guide the back plate on. Using a soft face hammer, tap the back cover so that it is in position for the rest of the bolts. Remove the M20 all thread and reinstall the M20 bolts in the top 2 holes. Using the 30mm wrench, tighten down the 4 bolts on the rear cover of the machine. At this time, reinstall the plastic end cap of the shaft using the 4mm Allen wrench. Reinstall the bearing spring plate. Using the M12 all thread as a guide, install the back cover to the machine. Install 3 of the bolts for the rear cover to make sure the holes line up. Remove the M12 all-thread rod and reinstall the last bolt and tighten down using the pull handle and the 18mm socket.